Welcome to Kim Talks Resilience, where we share stories of insight and inspiration in life, love, and business with resilient women from around the world. Speaking with authors, entrepreneurs, founders, and coaches to learn their strategies for a more resilient life so we can all build the life we love. I'm your host, Kim Hayden. One of the coolest things that I've had experienced over the last few years is, in doing this podcast is meeting women who are willing to step out in front, women who are taking the lead, women who are making the change. We're not waiting for the banks to come and say, here's a check and go start a business. We're saying we're going to go start a business and we're going to change everything ourselves. And, meeting women along this journey and seeing what they're doing and then finding out their strategies and insight as to how they've gotten here and what they're doing so we can all move forward together. That's what this is all about. This is building community. So today we have Summer Davies. Summer helps burgeoning leaders develop the mindset and tactical skills that they need to lead with impact, confidence, empowerment, and love what they do. For over 15 years, Summer has been an award-winning leadership development expert focused on cultivating thriving work environments that people feel equipped, capable, valued, and connected. It has been Summer's privilege to coach, teach, and study leaders around the world, and her unique depth and breadth of experience has given her an unending passion for helping managers bring to life the leader that they want to be and love leading. And this is a unique skill because a lot of us are managers. We're better at managing. We're not necessarily leaders. And it's okay to be either one because you cannot have one without the other. But we're going to bring Summer in. And hello, Summer.
Hi, Kim.
Heralding from Colorado, one of my favorite states. Beautiful state. It's I kind of view it as the sister state to Alberta. We've all got mountains and gorgeous trees. Do you guys have moose down there by chance?
We do in the higher elevation, not down
Higher
by
elevation.
where we live, but we do have moose.
You do have moose. Okay. I was just curious because we have moose here. And I remember coming to Alberta a first time seeing a moose and I was just like gobsmacked. It's like, oh my God, my girlfriend just saw an albino one.
Oh,
She's got
I
an
didn't know that was
albino.
a thing.
Yes, an albino moose. She's on an acreage just south of me. And there was an albino moose out in the back 40 and had a calf, which wasn't albino. But I thought that was pretty fascinating because I never knew somebody who actually saw one. I've seen pictures, but I didn't know. Okay.
She should buy a lottery ticket.
She should buy a lottery ticket. She should buy we're just melting here. So those of you who are sweating it out down south, so I'm finally seeing the brown grass and I'm so excited because brown grass means the snow is gone. So let's get started here with, I want to know a bit more of who is Summer. Set the pre-frame. Show us who you are.
Yeah, so a little bit about me. I know you mentioned I'm a leadership coach, but I'm a number of things outside of that. I'm a Colorado native. There's not a ton of us, but I am one of them. I'm originally from Boulder, Colorado. I'm an equestrian. I've been riding most of my life, and that absolutely comes into a lot of my story around resilience and how I ended up where I am today. And as of now, I'm a mom. I've got two amazing little girls. I have a fabulous husband. We get to live just south of Denver, which is such a special place in the world to live. And we've got a couple new adventures going on in our life. We've been beekeepers for a couple of years. We're adding another hive this year, which is a big deal. If you're a beekeeper, you know about that. And we added chickens this year. So we have a lot going on in our life outside of work.
It's funny because there's so many parallels that you're talking about, and literally is such a parallel city to where we're at. Because beekeeping that's a lot of work. People don't realize you have to nurture them, and they can get they're really sensitive. Because my girlfriend had several hives, and then one hive overproduced, one hive underproduced, and there were some challenges, but then she was talking about what they feed them during the winter and all sorts of things. So let's go into this first, I want to dive a bit into what you do for a living, um, as a leadership coach. I want to talk about that, and I do want to know quickly from your perspective, leadership and management.
Hmm.
I want to dive into that a little bit because a lot of people, they assume they're interchangeable.
Hmm. Yeah, and actually, that's a bit of the space that I play. So I specialize working with new frontline and developing leaders. There's lots of coaches out there who work all across the spectrum of leaders. And I work a lot with the people who might be in that category of management, meaning that they probably look after a frontline team or developing team, or they're kind of in the middle slice of an organization. And a lot of the management that you might traditionally say those kind of management activities happen at that level of organization. And so the difference for me, often management is more activity based. So you're talking about how do I look after the tasks my team does? How do we get work done? How do we meet goals? That sort of thing. And leadership is the other side of that around how do I help my team understand why do we do these things? What's the purpose? How do we connect to the success of the organization? How do we connect that to our individual success? So that can be the differentiator. And I think it's important to call out that those two things don't necessarily have to go together. I know many great leaders who are not so great managers, and many great managers who are not great leaders, and that's okay. But what I try to help people do is connect those two things and find purpose in the connection there.
So I would say that I fall within the leadership space. I
Mhm,
am not the best at management.
mhm.
I am, and I try to put too many hats on at times. So walk me through when you walk into a space and you know that um, there's a real possibility of true growth within the organization if everybody can just get the right hat on. What does that look like? What does that kind of conversation look like?
Well, often it depends on what that means. So that happens a lot where you've got people who are tremendous managers, but they're just not so good at doing the everyday stuff. And then the opposite with folks who are really great managing. So a lot of times it's about helping organizations understand first, what type of organization do you want to be? Does this matter to you that you've got a disconnect going on here? If the answer to that question is yes, then great. We can start getting into what does that look like? For what purpose? And how can we start piecing that out so we can get people what they need? So, if they happen to be in the management space and they're so amazing at, let's say, getting work done through others, right? They're great at prioritizing, they're great at delegating, they do that really well, but they don't have a huge vision for the long term. Well, let's help them with those skills. If you've got somebody who is really great at saying, hey, I've got a long term vision, but I can't give feedback to save my life, super. We can work on those skills. So then we can start getting into the parts and pieces. But first, it's really about answering that question. Does this matter to you as an organization? And if the answer is no, that's okay too. But let's just get clean with it and be clear about what type of organization do you want to be and where do you want to invest so we're not messing around doing something that doesn't actually matter in the long run.
Do you find that their mission statements or vision statements, do you go into that kind of foundational pieces in order to help, I guess, direct the growth within the leadership space?
Sometimes. And if we're being really honest, there are organizations who have mission statements or vision statements or purpose statements that are authentic and they really are living those. And then you have quite a lot who are not. And so you have to understand if those things are culturally alive in the organization. And if they are, then it's useful. If they're not, as a coach, one of the bravery moments that you have to have is to say, hey, listen, you've written whatever it is on the wall about who you want to be as an organization and your culture doesn't reflect that. So totally free from judgment, but let's just be clear that's not where we're going. And so either you want to redo that and repaint the wall, that's cool, or let's just say okay, we're going to be focusing on something different that's more true to who we are now because maybe we painted the wall 5 years ago before COVID was a thing and now we're someone different and that's okay. But it's just about having that kind of courageous conversation there.
And how has COVID impacted your business? Because you've been in business 15 years. This is not a new business. A lot of businesses that are out there have completely reinvented in the last 48 months. but
Mhm.
with 15 years underneath your belt, what are the pros and cons that you've seen come from COVID?
Yeah, so I've been in leadership development for 15 years, and there's been a number of changes and number of things that have stayed the same. So I resist a little bit the idea that things are completely different in the leadership space now because work environment's different and that sort of thing. Actually, what I'm finding is that the foundational skills that you need to be an effective manager or an effective leader are the same. There's a lot of talk in this space about what's needed from the leader of the future, what's needed from new leaders now, and there is some new things like the ability to manage a virtual team. I think there's an increased emphasis on empathy, which are great, but the foundational skills behind those are largely the same. The thing I get super jazzed up about is the openness to new ways of learning and developing that exists now
Yeah.
that was not there for maybe even 3 years ago when there was the possibility to say, oh, well, let's just do it the way we've always done it. We've got some new perspective, which I'm super excited about.
I spoke to a woman recently in a law firm, and I know that law firms are different than, a commerce
Hmm.
business, but
Hmm.
one of the things that she was questioning is that when people come into these when you become a lawyer,
Hmm.
you spend your first 5, 6, 7 years basically in a mentorship space,
Hmm.
learning so you can accelerate through. With more people working remotely, how does that impact leaders? How does
Hmm.
that how do we pick up and make that bridge that gap that is a concern that some people will not excel to the levels that they could have excelled if they were hip to hip in a physical space? How
Hmm.
can we make those bridges?
Oh, for leaders, this is one of those things that I think has always been a foundational skill and is even more important today than perhaps it was 5 years ago. And that's the ability to clarify how an individual adds value and then how that value then connects to the overall performance of an organization. And that's about setting vision and purpose and all of those sorts of things. And it really ladders back down to effective communication skills. So if you were a leader who could kind of get away with not so great leadership skills because you were in the room and you were just really magnetic in person and you don't get to be in person with your folks today, you've got to find a way to bridge that a bit by increasing your ability to be effective in communication and translating that magnetic personality to a virtual setting. The other place I think that shows up so much in virtual settings is how do you help people feel included when they're contributing? So if you're in a virtual space, it may be more difficult to speak up if you're on a Zoom meeting and that's not something you're really comfortable with. So how do you start inviting some of those other perspectives in different ways so that you don't lose out on some of those really amazing contributions from people who may not be as comfortable with the setting or speaking up or whatever the case might be. And so just leaning into a muscle that hopefully was already there. And if it wasn't, increasing the focus on how do you build that muscle so that you can be super effective communicating on all platforms and super effective including others on multiple platforms that maybe didn't even exist a few years ago.
Excellent. And I think there's so many opportunities coming at us right now that I'm actually quite excited for where things are coming about because, um, you know, it used to be that you had to have a piece of paper
Mhm.
that said you were worthy of this job or this opportunity or this level of leadership or this level of respect, right? And we're starting to see movement away from a lot of that. So
Mhm.
we're starting to see like Web3 levels have a free open source edx.org university now.
Mhm.
So there's the way we're learning is at such a rapid pace right now for those of us. Here's my question for you. I'm going to assume we all know what assuming does. I'm going to assume that those who listen to this show are always looking for opportunity to level up, to make the world a little bit better, to create a better community, to lean in and serve others in one way or another, be it through, a commerce connection or a nonprofit connection or whatever, or community connection. And we all have stair steps,
Mhm.
right? We all have stair steps. There's always learning going on. If you're growing, you're learning, right? What would you say to when you're presented with a leader or when you're presented with somebody, you've come in to do this leadership training, and you know that if they just got out of their own way, they could not only achieve what they want, but grow so much more. So when we think about this, we think about, people who are, and I think more so like in women, but when people are looking at, should I go for that job? Should I lean into that leadership? Should I do that? And now we're seeing this trend of helping women become board ready. How do you navigate boards so you can
Mhm.
actually you can get that next level up in in the financial integrity within a community,
Mhm.
right? And,
Mhm.
and because we need to get 50% parity on these boards. And I think right now most boards are still running only like 30% are female. I think that's the
Mhm.
national average. How do you get them to get out of their own way?
Whew.
I know
So
this is
I
a
would
hard one.
It is
Sorry.
it is a hard one, and it's a really important one. So, you wanna be really careful in how we think about this because interestingly, I run up to probably an equal amount of men who are in their own way as women, and it presents differently, which is why we see some of the different outcomes, but I would say the answer is probably the same irrespective of sex. Um, Generally, it's about how do we help get that individual back to why they're doing this? What is the reason that they want to do it? I know almost no one who would say, well, I want to be on a board just because I want to be on a board, right? There is a reason behind it. Very rarely that reason is financial. It may be because it feeds an ego, which is okay. We can start to peel back to what is important to you about that. And essentially, it's how do you help somebody walk all the way back to what is the impact you want to make with the time you have on this earth? And a lot of times, if you can get clear with that, leadership is the fastest way to be able to make that impact. So, whether that impact is, I want to develop and connect with others, awesome. Leadership is a great way to do that. I want to make my community a better place to live. Cool. There's some really cool ways to do that through leadership, through growing your ability to both manage and lead. But helping someone understand what is their unique reason that they want to be in leadership and how do we continue to connect your activities to that reason, then all the other stuff doesn't matter as much because then it's just stuff, right? It's just about, I'm going to be really clear about this is what I'm here to do and go after those opportunities. And then we stop seeing as much conversation around confidence or burnout or all those other things that we hear a lot about
Yeah.
because you're not doing activities that don't matter to you and then drain your energy. You're doing all the activities that boost your energy, that matter to you, and you feel that desire to grow your skills in that space. And it totally changes the game. So I think it's just about peeling back the layers to get to why is it you've chosen to be in leadership and why is it you've chosen this path?
Knowing your purpose, knowing the
Mhm.
purpose. What are the flags? What are the things that we can identify that we know that we need to reach out and get a leadership coach, get somebody engaged? What are some of the things, you know what I'm saying? There's always
Mhm.
red flags in our organization going, and here's the reality. You start you have a small business, you need like a gazillion people, but you can only afford 1 or 2,
Yeah.
right? As we're all growing. So I know that we need a lot of support. You cannot build a business, you cannot build a brand, you cannot build a legacy on your own.
Mhm.
You just can't. They say if you wanna go fast, go alone. If you wanna go far, go together. So if you're building something that has some legs to it, something that can withstand, you're gonna need to have people around you. If I'm seeing these flags, I should call you. What would those be?
For leaders, if you're starting to be into a place where the work of leading others feels more taxing than whatever it is that you do, your kind of your zone of genius area, that means that you probably are struggling in your leadership skills. So it's time to reach out and get some help. And for a lot of people, these show up in places like giving feedback, delegating work, flexing your style. So you walk away from a conversation and you're like, man, I don't know what was wrong with that conversation, but I'm pretty sure that person and I did not have the same conversation. I had really good intentions. I needed to relay a message to them, and I'm pretty sure that's not what I did, but you're not totally clear on what went south there. That's usually some signs that maybe your leadership skills or your management skills aren't where they need to be able to make you feel like you're really confident, you're really capable, and you can focus on the rest of what you do. So if that's happening, that's a good time to look at building some of those skills. If you're waking up at night going, I have to have this conversation with this person and I'm worried about it. I'm nervous about giving this person feedback, about asking this person to do this task. That probably means that we can help you with your skill set, getting you equipped so that you're not feeling like asking somebody to do work is causing me more stress, draining more energy than getting the work done.
And yeah, and sometimes it's easier just to go and do the work than try to explain how you want it done.
If you're there, that's a skill set. So
That's a
that
skill
is
set.
something that's a skill set, right? So being able to
Yep,
delegate work, if you're in that place where delegating the work is more work than doing the work, that's
that's a
where
skill set. That's
that's
what
where
we
we
would
want to
work
work on
on.
the skill set.
How
That's
does
it.
that how does that work with, virtual assistants? Like,
Oh,
a lot of us are getting virtual
yeah.
assistants, because it's you know what? Here's the reality. I don't know anybody in Canada who will work for $10, $12 an hour. I just don't. And, I don't know anybody who wants to work for $15 an hour or even
Mhm,
$18 an hour, right? So these are just
mhm,
realities, right? So the upside to the virtual world is that economies are being elevated and equalized all around the world. So it's not a bad thing.
mhm,
But it's I'm gonna assume it's really hard if you don't have that leadership management space, you don't have all that figured out. What are some strategies? First of all, tell me what's the toughest one you've walked into? Let's do this. Do not name names or anything. Give us an example. Toughest situation you've walked into that you were able to crush it, come out and have a gold star on the other side. So I always believe story gives us a really kind of a point of relevance. And I'd love
mhm.
to, if you could share a story with us, one that you walked in and said, "Oh my gosh," and then you crushed it and got a gold star.
Oh, so I'll give you a little bit of background. I did not plan on being in leadership development. That was not my planned profession. My undergraduate degree is in equine reproduction. That is not what I do anymore. And through a kind of a crazy series of events, I ended up in a job running a veterinary hospital. And they asked me to manage the operations. I was super young. I was in my early 20s. I'd never led a team before. I had no management skills. I'd never worked in a veterinary hospital. I had no business doing what I was doing. And I was thrown into leading this team. And for a little while, it was a pretty big hot mess. Um, and that's actually what spurred my love and my desire for leadership development. And so then I ended up over time working with a lot of veterinarians. And one of the biggest disservices to that profession is then and now, many veterinary schools don't ever teach leadership skills. They teach amazing medicine, they teach great clinical skills, but they very rarely teach communication and they almost never teach leadership skills. And the unfortunate thing for veterinarians, and this is probably true for doctors or anybody else in one of those types of professions, is that you get out of school, you get your first job, they hand you a white coat, and you walk in, and everybody thinks you're a leader and they think you know how to do it. And so you may have the medicine nailed, but your clients and your staff all think you also know how to be a leader. And that may not be true. And so what ends up happening in that profession and in many, many others is that they fake it until they figure it out. And sometimes they're so good at faking it that that goes on for a really long time. So one of the hardest situations I've ever walked into was a hospital that needed help. It was a big veterinary hospital. And the lead doctor had been faking it for so long, everybody thought he knew what he was doing. And he built a huge ego and behavior system around faking it, and actually had convinced himself he did know what he was doing. And so he actually thought he was killing it every single day. And in fact, he was driving his team crazy and in many cases straight out the door, right? They could not keep staff on to save their life for any amount of money. And so that situation was one of the hardest, where you had somebody who'd convinced themselves that they knew what they were doing, but their foundational skills were built on just pretending. So anytime I run into a situation like that, having somebody come along with me in a way that they feel safe, they don't feel like they're going to be exposed, they don't feel like they're going to get called out and embarrassed in front of their team, and you can help them slowly start to trust that, yes, you can build skills without losing face, without losing your ego. And in fact, there is a better way. That's the hardest. And it's something that doesn't happen overnight, because if I've just walked into your situation, you don't know that you can trust me, and I'm not going to do all these, embarrassing things that are going to make you um, expose the fact that maybe you don't know as much as you think you do know, and that there might be a better way. So those have been the hardest situations. That one sticks out in my mind because it was the hardest, and he was the hardest that I'd ever worked with. But we got there in the end, and it just took a lot of proving that this can be done safely, and that the other side is better if you put the time in.
And those who are in leadership spots, whether or not they're proven leaders, right?
Mhm.
There is a weight. There is a weight on you, because you wanna make sure you hit payroll, and you wanna make sure that, you're so that is a sticky space to be. And I want everybody to know, like, I'm on Tylenol sinus medicine right now, so I totally forgot the one thing I wanted to ask before that we got side but I'm so glad we talked about that, because that fake it till you make it is not
Mhm.
always the best course of action. But virtual assistants, how do you lead with virtual assistants?
A virtual assistant to me isn't that much different from anyone else on your team. One of the most important things is making sure they understand, what is it we're trying to do here? So some people might call that mission and purpose. What does success look like? So getting really clear on, what are the objectives, what are the metrics we're working towards, and then how will we work together? So being super clear and investing the time to understand, what are the ways of working that work best for them, what are the ways of working that work best for me, and how can we agree upon those ways of working? And especially with a virtual assistant, that last one I think becomes really important, so that you're clear, what are the hours we're going to work in? What type of turnaround am I looking for from you? So those sound really tactical, but spending the time investing and getting clear on those, I think, is really important for virtual assistants, for anybody working in a virtual world, and actually for any team, to be clear about, how are we going to work together? What does success look like? How are we going to measure it? If we can get clear on those things, we can avoid massive problems down the road.
Excellent. So clarity up front.
Mhm.
No, the whole, what are your KPIs? What is that key performance indicator that is going to keep everybody feeling like, okay, we're moving together, right? Just
Yeah.
having understanding of that. Um, if you're open to it, Summer, I'd love to know a story of resilience because this is not an easy journey. Mother of two, horses must look much easier at times, right?
Mhm.
Um, you know, and, but like I said, we learn through story. I love story. So if you could share a story with us as to that moment of resiliency where, what did you hit and how did you push through?
Oh my gosh. So I knew this one was coming. And there's a number that I could probably share, but I think I'll share a really early one that's kind of been foundational for me. So I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, and my family, we we grew up experiencing right along the poverty line. So we were very fortunate that we weren't often food insecure, but we definitely had some experiences in that space. And I wanted to ride horses, which is possibly the most expensive hobby you can find on earth. So me saying, "Hey, I want to go ride horses," was like, "Hey, I want to go to the moon." Equal probability that those things were going to happen. And what I ended up doing was finding a barn that I could walk to and I could clean stalls and be able to ride. And so what that enabled me to do was ride the horses that were available to ride. And those are usually the horses nobody else wants to ride. So either they're crazy or they're not very well trained or something going on. And that opportunity when I was young always felt like, well, this sucks. Like everybody else has got fancy cool horses and fancy cool equipment. And now that I'm an adult, I can look back at that and say that taught me many more skills than I could possibly have asked to learn had I been given all the fancy stuff and all the right stuff. And so being able to grow up in an experience where I never had the best of it, um, and I was always kind of having to work really hard to be able to get what the people around me had, gave me an appreciation for how valuable those experiences would be in the long run. And now I can, right? I'm an adult. I can go do what I want to do. Um, and I've been able to then translate that often to leadership development because for many leaders, what happens is they don't have access to the best development right away and they have to work for it and fight for it. Actually, I just read a study the other day that on average, leaders wait 19 years to get formal development, which means that they spend 19 years in that kind of space that I was, which was finding what they could find, trying to piece things together, trying to figure it out on their own. And sometimes they get really successful and sometimes they struggle, and it's much harder than it needs to be. And so being able to piece those things together and take those lessons that I had when I was young and say, listen, it's not always going to be easy. And the hard is what's going to help in the long run has been foundational to my business and to the way that I coach folks and helping them see there is an easier way. And sometimes you still got to put in the work and go through the really hard stuff so that you can be great in the long run. So that's a bit about my background.
I and there's such a poignant lesson in there. Um, as so many people sit and wait for the easy answer to come along, right? Because
Mhm.
Uber Eats and we're gonna drop here and go there and everything gets delivered and they'll have it in a day and all this other stuff. The real stuff takes time. The
Mhm.
real stuff takes effort. And um, I love that you as a child learn to become a solution-oriented individual from the beginning. I think that's the big one. I think that's what I'm taking away from this is that you intuitively, as a child, knew that you had to create the solution in order to have the opportunity. That's what do you got? You're gonna say something.
I was going to say, I think all of us have some of that in us. It's do we take the opportunity to do something with it? And great leaders help make the conditions where that can happen too. So I think that there's great opportunity for lots of people to think about where have I done this? Okay, I can do it. And how can I keep repeating that going forward to lean into my purpose and to get the most out of what I've got in front of me?
I always say people say, "Oh, I was lucky." And I was like, "You know what? After conception, your luck is run out.
Mm,
Everything else is opportunity and taking action. Where
mhm,
opportunity meets action, that is your luck. And are you doing it?" And I know that there's a lot of people that really do. They go, "Well, I don't have this and I don't have that." And, you know, or they're afraid. They're afraid.
mhm.
And I think we've talked a lot about that here today is just, at some point in time, you've got to rip that Band-Aid off and you've got to do it the right way if you want to grow the next level, go the next level, connect or build to the next level. Um, what is a book that you recommend everybody read?
Okay, so I have a couple.
Awesome.
If you're a leader, there's two that you absolutely must read. Start with The Why by Simon Sinek. It's a classic. It's been around for a while, but it's it's critical. And then the other one is called First Break All the Rules, which is about leadership and the importance of driving productivity and success and how much that lands on certain behaviors from the leaders. So if you've not done First Break All the Rules, that one is amazing. And then there's a new book out, which was just released, I think, about 6 months ago, and it's called Remarkable Leadership. And it's a smaller book, but it's absolutely brilliant. And it's one of my current favorites. So, Remarkable Leadership by Danielle McLeod.
Excellent. Excellent. So that's one of the things I love about the show is we get some good reading strategies, good insight as to what should be in your earbuds. Where can people find you, connect with you, contact you? How do we engage?
LinkedIn is a great place to find me. My business, which is called Leader Shop, is on LinkedIn. It's a great place to find me, and I pretty regularly post little bits of leadership insight. So I think that's the first place I would go, and then of course you can find me online, Instagram, all that jazz.
Excellent. And we're going to have all of Summer's socials in the comments below and those books. Summer, I always ask for a quote because sometimes days are hard. Says, awesome session. Oh, thank you, Joanna. We had somebody saying, awesome session. That's awesome. I'm so glad. That's what we're here for. We're here to help people. Ladies and gentlemen, but those of us, we all can do more. I promise. I promise you there is more out there. We just have to be receptive to those who can help guide us. And that's the big one. Summer, give me a quote, something that will help carry others through when they need to borrow a quote for the day.
Brian Andreas is a poet and an author. He's based in Iowa, and I'm a massive fan. One of his quotes is, anyone can slay a dragon, but wake up and love the world again the next day is what takes a real hero. And that's my favorite.
That's a good one.
I'll put it in the chat and credit Brian for it.
Excellent.
And I say Brian like he's my best friend. I don't actually know him.
Oh, maybe we'll work on that. Maybe we'll work on that, Summer. All righty. Okay, folks, until next time, you know what? I hope you had your pen and paper. You can come back, listen to this again. Summer, you are a rock star. Thank you for all that you're doing. I'm not going to say that, the horses missed out, but the horses did miss out. But we're glad that you're doing what you're doing because this is definitely your calling. And hug those little girls. Oh my gosh, I miss my babies. They're all old now. I have grandbabies. Grandbabies are where it's at. And good luck with the beehives.
Thank you.
Excellent. So until next time, folks, you know what? All I can say is be good to yourself. And you know what? Get the support, get the leadership, get the guidance when you need it, because those around you who are counting on you will be thankful. Until next time.
Thank you for joining us here today at Kim Talks Resilience. I'm your host, Kim Hayden, and I'd love to invite you to our resilient community at resilientgift.com. That's resilientgift.com, and we'll send you our magazine and tickets for upcoming events and all sorts of cool things we do here. So be sure to keep watching, and you know what? Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share, because we all know that sharing is caring.